When naming the worst players in the NBA, there are many factors that must be looked at to determine who has actually played the worst that season. You have to consider a player's performance relative to their salary, expectations, and current team situation. So welcome to NBA Zone, and in today's video, we'll be taking a look at all of these factors and determining the top 10 worst NBA players of 2019. In number 10, we have Miles Plumley. Miles Plumley is another example of a Duke player coming into the NBA and underperforming. Throughout his entire 9-year career, Miles has yet to score more than 5 points and grab more than 5 rebounds per game in a season. And considering the fact that he's being paid $12.5 million, you'd think that he'd be able to do better than his current 4.4 points and 2.2 rebounds per game for a Hawks team that has a record of 29-52. Even with the Hawks being as bad as they are, Plumlee can't even muster more than 9.6 minutes per game for the team. So Miles Plumlee is certainly a player that will be looked down upon for his performance this season, mainly based on his salary. At number 9, we have Luol Deng. Luol Deng was once an all-star, not once, but twice, but he's fallen very far from that pedestal. During his time in Chicago early in his career, Deng was considered to be a viable scoring option for the team, but a trade during the 2014 season that would send Deng to the Cavaliers would seem to be the end of his prime. He would go on to play for the Miami Heat and Los Angeles Lakers for 2 years each. Then, as Tom Thibodeau tried to recreate the 2011 Chicago Bulls in Minnesota, he would bring in Luol Deng for the 2019 NBA season. Deng is only being paid $2.4 million this season, so he's not hitting the team's payroll too hard, but it's his very poor performance on the court that makes Deng one of the worst players in the NBA today. He's only played in 22 games this season, and in about 18 minutes per game, he's only putting up 7 points and 3.3 rebounds per game. He's barely playing because there's quite frankly nowhere for him to play. He's proven to be too inefficient and in no way benefits the Timberwolves roster.
The next 8. Look at these guys, George. Oh yeah, competing. Fun to watch. Noah by himself.
Number 8, we have Joakim Noah. Joakim Noah was a 2-time All-Star, 1-time All-NBA selection, 3-time All-Defensive Team selection, and 2013-2014 Defensive Player of the Year. And damn, has he fallen a long way from that. Just 5 years ago, Joakim was named the NBA's Defensive Player of the Year playing for the Chicago Bulls. But immediately after that, things would go very wrong for Noah. And over the next 2 years in Chicago, his statistics would drop and his status as one of the best glue guys in the league would crumble. Then in 2016, Noah would sign a whopping 4-year, $72 million deal with the New York Knicks. A completely unjustifiable deal that would screw the Knicks, as they would end up having to pay the remainder of that contract after Noah got into an argument with the head coach, Jeff Hornacek, that would cause him to be released. This would land Joakim in free agency for a while, but he would eventually sign a deal with the Memphis Grizzlies, where he's not done a whole lot better for himself. He's getting paid the vets minimum to barely contribute on a terrible Memphis Grizzlies team. At number 7, we have Ian Mahinmi. Drafted by the Spurs all the way back in 2005, Ian Mahinmi has bounced around the league ever since entering the league in 2007. He would have practically no role for the 3 teams he played for during the first 8 years of his career, but come the 2016 NBA season, Mahinmi would find a decent role with the Indiana Pacers. He would average 9.3 points and 7.1 rebounds a game for the Pacers, but this would unfortunately be the end of Mahinmi's effectiveness on the basketball court. After that breakout season, he would sign a $64 million deal with the Washington Wizards, where he's proven to be one of the most overpaid players in today's NBA. Last year, he struggled with injuries early on in the season. But even when healthy just like this year, Jan still hasn't been producing for the Wizards. Now at the age of 32, the Wizards are paying Mahinmi $16 million a season to put up numbers that your school janitor could put up. He's averaging 4.1 points and 3.8 rebounds per game this season. Now, I don't know about you guys, but to me, that's not a stat line worth $16 million. At number 6, we have Cristiano Felicio. Cristiano Felicio was practically an unknown commodity coming into the NBA. He kind of just showed up one day on the Chicago Bulls roster looking buff as hell. In his first contract with the Chicago Bulls, he would impress the team enough to earn himself a second contract with the team. In his first year under contract, Felicio would spend much of his time down in the G League. Felicio would pretty much be swapped between the NBA and the G League repeatedly until this year, where the Chicago Bulls would be so bad that they would actually give Felicio his chance to shine. But Felicio did the opposite of shine, as one could say he dimmed the lights. Because this year, Cristiano Felicio is being paid $8.5 million to score 3.1 points and grab 2.8 rebounds a game. Felicio will keep being paid this amount too, as his contract is set to last through the 2021 NBA season. This is thanks to the 4-year $32 million deal that Felicio signed back in 2017. So the Bulls will basically be out $8.5 million per year over the next 2 years if Felicio doesn't get things together. But hey, at least they'll be in the running for the number 1 pick. And number 5, we have Bismack Biyombo. Believe it or not, Bismack Biyombo was actually the 7th pick in the 2011 NBA draft, and he's far from lived up to the expectations of a top 10 pick. Through the first 3 years of Biyombo's career, he actually got worse every year, but he would eventually get back to the numbers that he put up his rookie year. Then during the 2016 NBA playoffs, Bismack Biyombo would make a name for himself as he was overhyped for playing good defense a couple of times and grabbing a decent amount of rebounds during a series. So all of this overhype would do good for Bismack, as it would net him a 4-year $72 million deal with the Orlando Magic the very next season. Yes, a player who averaged 5.5 points and 8 rebounds per game somehow earned a $72 million deal. The Magic must have been off the loud during that negotiation, and they screwed themselves over the next 2 seasons. But luckily they were able to dump him off to the genius front office in Charlotte. Now in Charlotte, Bismack Biyombo is being paid $17 million a season to put up 4.5 points and 4.9 rebounds per game. The Michael Jordan crying meme could not be more necessary in this situation. And number 4, we have Timofey Mozgov. Timofey Mozgov is a player whose career began with a bit of infamy, as he was known for being posterized by Blake Griffin on a level that competes with death. Now if anyone gets dunked on like this, it's literally referred to as being Mozgov. You can actually find compilations of Mozgov getting dunked on over his NBA career all over the internet. So that's the infamy I'm referring to. But during the Cavaliers' 2016 march to the NBA title, Mozgov was actually a core part to the regular season. He didn't produce as much during the playoffs, but his regular season production actually raised his value a bit. So, going into that offseason, the Los Angeles Lakers would give out what seems to be the worst contract in sports history, as Mozgov would ink a 4-year, $64 million deal with the team. And ever since then, Timofey Mozgov has struggled to find playing time and a home. But you can't blame these NBA teams for not wanting to pay that salary. At number 3, we have Lonzo Ball. Now I know what you're thinking, Lonzo Ball isn't even that bad, right? Well, if you consider where he was drafted and his expectations, Lonzo Ball has been straight up bust so far. Lonzo can barely seem to play more than half of a season in the NBA due to lingering ankle injuries, which by the way are suspected to be linked to his Big Baller brand signature shoes. Then when Lonzo does play, he's very inconsistent and inefficient on the offensive end of the floor. This season he shot 40% from the field and 32% from the 3. He's basically proven to be complete non-threat offensively, as teams don't have to worry about him being aggressive on the offensive end of the floor. For a player that drew comparisons to Jason Kidd and Penny Hardaway, Ball has done nothing to prove that he can play to that standard one day. He was expected to be the next great NBA point guard, but Lonzo Ball has been nothing but bad so far in the NBA. Flashes of his potential here and there, but overall Lonzo fell way short of the bar that was set for him. At number 2, we have Ryan Anderson. I remember back in the 2014 NBA season when Ryan Anderson was considered to be an all-star snub. Now he's one of those players that you sit back and think, whatever happened to him? Well, Ryan Anderson is still in the NBA, but maybe he shouldn't be, especially not at his current salary. After a few good seasons with Houston a couple years back, Ryan Anderson has only declined since then. His time in Houston earned him a huge contract as he flourished in Mike D'Antoni's system. But it proved to be just a fluke, as during his last year in Houston, his numbers went down, and for some unknown reason, the rebuilding Phoenix Suns thought it would be a good idea to trade a young Marquise Chris who has a lot of potential and Brandon Knight for Ryan Anderson and his $20.4 million contract. I don't see how that trade could have possibly made any sense for the team, but they were able to make up for their mistakes by trading him to the Heat. So sorry Heat fans, aka myself, as we have to endure the great value that is Ryan Anderson. Now finally, at our number 1 spot, we have Chandler Parsons. Now when you're thinking about the worst players in the NBA off the top of your head, I guarantee Chandler Parsons isn't a name that comes to mind. It's probably not because you don't think he's a bad player, but more so the fact that you probably forgot about his mere existence. Chandler Parsons used to be considered one of the NBA's up-and-coming sharpshooters, but now he's one of the most overpaid and underperforming players in all of the NBA. Chandler Parsons is being paid $24 million this season at the age of 30 to put up 7.5 points a game for the Memphis Grizzlies. Over his time under this ridiculous contract, Parsons has battled injuries, but even when he's healthy, he's played some of the most inefficient basketball in the league for some of the league's worst teams, making Chandler Parsons the worst in the NBA today. So that's going to do it for today's video. What are your thoughts? Do you agree? Do you disagree? Let me know in the comments below. Also, if you enjoyed this video, then make sure to drop a like and consider subscribing to the channel. Anyways, I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.
Felicio on him. There's the step